Hollywood has always danced with temptation. Beneath the red carpets and flashing cameras, there lies a darker rhythm, the one pulsing through veins filled with fame and cocaine. It's a city where success comes faster than sobriety, and where the fall is always public. For decades, drugs have been the silent co-stars of the industry, adored in secret, punished in headlines. Some stars lost their freedom, others lost their lives. Behind every mugshot is a broken dream. Behind every overdose, a human cry. Today, we revisit 10 of the worst drug busts in Hollywood history, the moments when fame met the law and lost.
Lindsay Lohan. The flashing lights that once made her famous would later follow her for all the wrong reasons. On May 26, 2007, Lindsay Lohan crashed her Mercedes in Beverly Hills. Inside, police found cocaine. Days later, she was arrested again, barefoot, chasing another car down the Pacific Coast Highway. The child who had conquered the world with The Parent Trap and Mean Girls was now Hollywood's most photographed disaster. Addiction had replaced ambition, and her mugshots became a cruel timeline of decay. What began as youthful rebellion turned into a decade of chaos, rehab, jail, probation, relapse, repeat. Behind the headlines was a girl raised in fame but starved of peace. Fame had never been a dream for Lindsay. It was a cage built by adults who needed her to keep performing. Years later, when she whispered, "I was just tired of being everyone's punchline," the world finally saw the truth, that her drug busts weren't about crime, but about pain. Lindsay Lohan's tragedy wasn't that she fell, it's that millions watched her do it, and no one ever tried to catch her.
Macaulay Culkin. September 17, 2004, Oklahoma City. Police stopped a car for speeding and found a pale, thin young man inside with marijuana, Xanax, and sleeping pills. The name on the ID was Macaulay Culkin, the boy who once made the world laugh in Home Alone. His arrest photo shocked everyone. The cherubic face of Christmas joy now hollowed by confusion. For years, Hollywood had paraded him as the perfect child star, earning millions before he turned 12. But behind the fame was chaos, parental fights over money, isolation, and a childhood spent on sets instead of playgrounds. When the spotlight faded, drugs became a refuge, a way to silence the echo of applause that never came back. His arrest marked the collapse of innocence the public didn't want to see. Yet, unlike many, Culkin survived. He withdrew from fame, embraced art and humor, and quietly rebuilt a life outside the circus that raised him. His drug bust wasn't the end. It was an escape from a world that had stolen his childhood long before the police ever stopped his car.
Paris Hilton. August 27, 2010. Las Vegas police stopped a black Cadillac after a cloud of marijuana smoke drifted from its windows. Inside sat Paris Hilton, the world's most photographed woman, clutching a purse that held a small bag of cocaine. It was her second arrest, and the timing couldn't have been more poetic. The party queen of the early 2000s, the woman who had turned excess into a brand, was now caught by the very spotlight she'd spent years controlling. Hilton insisted the purse wasn't hers, a denial that became an instant meme. Yet behind the glamour and absurdity was something darker, a girl raised by fame before she ever understood freedom. Her drug bust wasn't about crime, it was about identity, a symbol of how celebrity had consumed her completely. The hotels bore her name, but she had nowhere to hide. The world laughed, but the laughter was cruel, because it wasn't just about cocaine. It was about a generation raised on illusion, fame without purpose, and emptiness dressed as luxury. Paris Hilton's arrest was the moment the fantasy turned on itself, when the mask of privilege finally cracked in public.
Matthew McConaughey, October 25, 1999. The quiet of a Texas neighborhood was shattered by drums and shouting. Police arrived to find actor Matthew McConaughey completely naked, playing bongos and surrounded by marijuana. The arrest report became instant tabloid gold. For years, he had been the face of charm and Southern cool, the romantic hero of Hollywood's golden rom-com era. But that night stripped away the illusion, quite literally. Though the charges were later dropped, the image of McConaughey high, laughing, and unbothered haunted his career. It wasn't about drugs, it was about control. Fame had turned his free spirit into a commodity, and that night he rebelled. For a moment, he was just a man trying to feel something real, not the image everyone expected. Afterward, he disappeared from the screen, choosing silence over spectacle. When he returned years later in Dallas Buyers Club, it wasn't just a comeback, it was a reinvention. He had traded the party boy for the philosopher. McConaughey's arrest became legend, not because it destroyed him, but because it marked the exact moment he stopped acting for Hollywood and started living for himself.
Robert Downey Jr. The night of June 23, 1996, police stopped a black Mercedes speeding down Sunset Boulevard. Inside was Robert Downey Jr., asleep, surrounded by heroin, cocaine, and a loaded gun. Just days later, he was found wandering into a neighbor's house, muttering lines from Hamlet. Once hailed as one of Hollywood's most gifted young actors, he had become its most tragic cautionary tale. From Oscar nominations to orange prison jumpsuits, his downfall was brutal and public. The addiction that began in childhood, nurtured by fame, had consumed him entirely. For 5 years, Downey drifted between arrests, probation, and rehab, a genius trapped in a chemical war with himself. But unlike most, he found a way back. With Iron Man, he didn't just rebuild a career, he resurrected a soul. Hollywood had written him off, yet he turned his mugshot into a monument of redemption. His story stands as a reminder that even at the bottom of the abyss, light can find its way in.
Tim Allen. In October 1978, before the sitcom fame and Disney movies, a 25-year-old Tim Allen was arrested at the Kalamazoo airport with nearly 650 grams of cocaine stuffed in his luggage. The man who would one day voice Buzz Lightyear was suddenly facing life in prison. Desperate, he struck a deal with federal agents, naming other dealers in exchange for a reduced sentence. He spent over 2 years behind bars, a far cry from the laughter he would later bring to millions. In prison, Allen learned how fragile identity could be. Comedy became survival, a shield against fear, guilt, and regret. When he walked free in 1981, he wasn't the same man. He was a survivor with a second chance. Hollywood's redemption stories rarely start in handcuffs, but his did. He rebuilt himself from mugshot to household name with Home Improvement and Toy Story, proving that even the darkest beginnings can lead to light. Yet his past never vanished. It became part of his act, a quiet confession wrapped in laughter. Tim Allen's drug bust was not the end of a dream, but the painful punchline that gave birth to one.
Whitney Houston. It was supposed to be just another airport routine.
In January 2000, security officers in Hawaii opened Whitney Houston's handbag and found marijuana. She denied ownership, smiled for the cameras, and boarded her flight. But that small incident was a signal, the first public crack in an empire built on perfection. For years, Whitney had been untouchable, the golden voice of America, the woman who made "I Will Always Love You" eternal. Yet behind that brilliance lived an addiction she could no longer control. Cocaine, prescription drugs, and a toxic marriage to Bobby Brown turned her life into a slow-motion tragedy. The woman who once ruled the charts was now ruled by dependency. Her arrest was only a symptom of the collapse to come. Cancelled concerts, trembling interviews, and that haunting reality show that exposed her pain. When she was found dead in a Beverly Hills hotel bathtub in 2012, her autopsy confirmed what fame had long whispered. The drugs had finally won. Whitney Houston's drug bust wasn't just an event, it was an omen. The greatest voice of her generation had drowned not in water, but in expectation.
Winona Ryder. December 12, 2001. Beverly Hills. Police walked into Saks Fifth Avenue and arrested one of Hollywood's most beloved actresses for shoplifting. Hidden in her designer handbag were thousands of dollars worth of clothes and prescription painkillers. The woman in handcuffs was Winona Ryder, the fragile, wide-eyed star who had once symbolized innocence in films like Edward Scissorhands and Little Women. The headlines were merciless: America's sweetheart turned kleptomaniac. But beneath the scandal lay a darker truth: exhaustion, depression, and dependence on medication after years of fame that began when she was just a teenager. Hollywood had built her up as an angel, only to enjoy watching her fall. The trial humiliated her, the studios turned away, and the girl who once ruled the 90s disappeared into silence. Yet time and honesty healed what the tabloids couldn't. Decades later, she returned in Stranger Things, older, wiser, and still trembling with humanity. Winona's story wasn't about theft. It was about a woman reclaiming the fragments of herself after fame tried to take them all.
Charlie Sheen. In October 2010, police were called to New York's Plaza Hotel. They found Charlie Sheen naked, drunk, and surrounded by cocaine. The once highest-paid actor on television had turned his suite into a war zone of addiction and rage. This wasn't his first fall, it was simply the loudest. Years of partying, escorts, and drugs had transformed the star of 2.5 Men into a tabloid phenomenon. When CBS finally fired him, Sheen declared himself a warlock with tiger blood, turning his breakdown into a global spectacle. Beneath the manic energy, there was tragedy. A man devoured by his own myth, unable to separate performance from pain. His drug busts weren't isolated incidents, they were symptoms of a fame that had no boundaries left to cross. In 2015, his public confession of living with HIV revealed the full cost of those years of excess. The laughter stopped, the headlines faded, and what remained was a man stripped of illusions, still searching for peace in the ruins of his own making. Charlie Sheen's story is Hollywood's cautionary mirror, proof that sometimes fame doesn't destroy you overnight. It does it slowly, until you join in the applause.
Elvis Presley. He was never handcuffed, never caught in a raid, but Elvis Presley's drug bust was written inside his body. By the late 1970s, the king of rock and roll was living in Graceland, surrounded not by guards, but by doctors. Each day, he swallowed a cocktail of prescription pills, amphetamines to wake up, barbiturates to sleep, opiates to numb the ache of fading fame. In August 1977, his heart finally gave out, collapsing under the weight of years of chemical escape. When investigators opened his medicine cabinet, they found over 10,000 pills prescribed in a single year. Elvis had turned into his own pharmacy, legally supplied, but spiritually broken. Unlike the others on this list, his addiction was endorsed, protected, even encouraged by the system that profited from his myth. His death wasn't treated as a scandal, it was sanitized, mourned, and forgotten. Yet in truth, it was the most devastating drug bust of them all, a man destroyed not by the law, but by indulgence disguised as care. Elvis Presley didn't overdose on rebellion, he overdosed on permission, the cruelest drug Hollywood ever gave.